to come in the next couple of days. But to join us is one organization who's now looking for a coach and GM to discuss about that. Former tight end Ed Smith is joining us here on the program. I want to start with this because the NFL, and one of the biggest takeaways is, and I've always remembered this even for as a life lesson, is usually when the money gets larger, the expectations and sometimes the issues, if things are not working, become much bigger than what they should, depending on it. And so now we've got 8 coaching jobs now officially open, including the Atlanta Falcons. So I feel like coaching has definitely changed up in a lot of years. The expectations with the money being larger from a lot of these owners. So if a team's expectations are not met, you're usually given the gavel, and now they have to look in a different future direction. So as you look at this for the Atlanta Falcons, I'm truthfully excited of the opportunity there because now a new coach, a new GM. My biggest prediction, I feel like this is a job that screams Kevin Stefanski, in my opinion, because I watched Michael Penix, and it drove me crazy. I had former Atlanta Falcons great John Abraham on the show when he was up front, up there in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, watching the offense. I'm asking him, I've watched drives where Penix is driving the field, and then they scale back. They're driving the field, and they're scaling back. I'm like, what are they doing up on offense? So to me, I feel they need an offensive-minded coach. Get the better scheme plan. Build your potential with Penix to see if he has it, because this is the only year to do so before tapping into a very bigger quarterback class next year. What do you think about that? I feel like this could be a very good fit for Atlanta.
It could be the prime. First off, thanks for having me on, Jake. The biggest thing is, I think Stefanski would be a great choice for the Falcons. The biggest obstacle I think they have in front of them is convincing Stefanski that this is the best possible option for him because of the amount of competition that's going to be out there. With the Miami job opening up, obviously Baltimore is open. We never know what might happen if Buffalo goes and lays an egg down in Jacksonville. So if this was one of those normal years where the worst of the worst jobs were open, I think Atlanta would be right at the top of the list. But because of the fact that everything is just so wide open with all these job openings, it's going to be a fight for him. Now, I'm right there with you. I do think they need to lead toward an offensive mind for that particular position, because we've tried it every other way, it seems. This last one with the defense, with Raheem, it just didn't work out. I think there was too much talent there offensively for them to, you look at what, Bijan, you got, tight end, you got quarterback, you got London Drake, wide receiver, you got all these weapons, and they were so sporadic. And it's just one of those things where, hey, we've tried it the other way. Let's go and find us an offensive mind that could lead this brigade, and then go get us a great defensive coordinator that could tighten the ship up on the other side. But this is obviously, and I think that's why they let Raheem go, because they saw what they were wasting. You got Penix. Even with the offense even looked doable with Cousins out there. So that's saying a whole bunch. But they had nobody to lead them. And, I just think this is this will be a great opportunity as far as, like I said, it's going to be there are going to be a lot of teams out there looking to scoop up Stefanski. And this is a weird year, too, because we're not hearing a whole bunch about, like, the hot coordinator now. Normally, there's always one or two hot coordinators. That's the next guy. This is going to be the year for, coaches who've been coaches before to make their mark again. And like I said, it's going to be slim pickings after you get through with Stefanski and Harbaugh and maybe a couple others. So, man, you better put your best foot forward when it comes to scooping these guys up.
Yeah, and what's funny is with the coaching openings, because originally it felt like it was a crapshoot with as far as destinations wise and the guys coming in. And then next thing you know, John Harbaugh's let go after 18 years. Mike McDaniel now is fired in Miami. And so I'm like, oh, the coaching carousel kind of got a little better, because now there's going to be coordinators up for grabs. And then there's going to be, a head coach that I feel like the Giants need a culture setter. And I think John Harbaugh would be the perfect fit for that. because they have not gotten anything structurized since the timeline of Tom Coughlin. And I think they need to bring that back for John Mara's sake. And then, you look at Baltimore, they're not looking for a culture change. They're looking for somebody that can honestly fix up what happened on the defense and bring more trust and reliability to Lamar Jackson, who's winning 75% of their games. So I feel like Brian Flores would be a guy that could work. Maybe you bring in someone like a Mike McDaniel. I proposed this with Pittsburgh originally, and now I feel like with watching this weekend, if Pittsburgh's one and done, who knows if Tomlin is still there, and that possibility is still open up. But I'm like, now Baltimore is in the makings for this, and they would be feeling terrified if I'm Pittsburgh and they get that, then now that's just going to be running along with it. So this weekend is going to be a lot of fun. And first off, I want to start with the Packers and Bears. Now, this is the third time now that they're going to be facing off against each other. The Packers are beat up. Jordan Love, is coming back with an injury, and there's just not a whole lot really left for Green Bay, but that doesn't mean offensively they can't come up with different scheme plans to outsmart a Chicago defense that, first of all, they've been really good getting after the football, causing turnovers and forced fumbles. But for Caleb Williams, even though that he's protecting of the football and not turning it over, it's the plays in which he has to make the layups, because I know he can sling the ball 30 plus downfield, but if you're not making the checks and the unscripted plays, that might be a long night for Chicago. I still feel Chicago as an underdog at home is a little more disrespectful, but I feel like they have the opportunity to do so. But maybe Green Bay's got a little magic somewhere in there. What do you think of this game?
This is going to be the typical NFC North I call this one of those. You remember Rock'em Sock'em Robots, man? This is going to be one of those type games. Just put them in the middle of the ring, and they're just going to battle it out. I do. I always caution when I'm looking at like these first experienced quarterbacks in the playoffs. Everybody thinks the regular season is, it's just the extension of the regular season, so there's no prep. Man, I've been there before, and I know my first playoff experience, I couldn't imagine like going through a regular season and then everything like ratcheted up even more. And that's exactly what happens when you get to the playoffs in the NFL. You think this couldn't get any faster than this. You go from training camp to preseason, then it ratchets, it gets even faster in regular season. There's no way it can get any more intense than this. And it does, because it's almost it's the epitome of like throwing two dogs in the middle of a room and saying, this is the only bone. You've both been starving. Here you go. Have at it. And that's what, because it's lose or go home. Your season's over just like that in an afternoon. And, for quarterbacks especially, they don't realize the pressure till it's on them when they're out there, because everything is on their shoulders. So I always worry like a first playoff season or series for a young quarterback, we're going to see like, is the pressure too much for them? And then, some of them we've seen where it has been, but then they bounce back, years later. So I think the advantage going into this one is Love has been there before. They do have a playoff win. They went and spanked Dallas a couple years ago, I think it was. They've got that experience at least, and this is going to be new for Caleb. And you hit it right on the head, Jake. As far as layups, man, you just got to hit the ones that are right there in front of you. And if he has any problems with that and with the spectacular plays, it could lead to a really bad afternoon for him. So I'm going to be watching early on just to make sure like it doesn't look like too frenetic for him. He might miss a throw here, but he bounces back with a good one later. If we see repetition of nothing looks good, it could be a long day for Chicago. Me personally, I just for some reason I got Green Bay in this one just because of the coaching experience. First time in the playoffs for not just the head coach, but the quarterback and kind of everybody involved. And this, like I said, it's going to be a great game. It's one of the ones I love this weekend because we got the best of the best. I also hate it because it means our 16-game regular season weeks are gone and we're getting down to the last of football because we go from wild card to divisional. We got the conference championship. Before you know it, man, it's going to be Super Bowl Sunday, and then we got that long wait. But in the meantime, we got to sink our teeth in this one. This is going to be one of the marquee games of the weekend right here.
Absolutely. Like I said, I think that game, depending on it, when it comes to time of possession, when it comes to, obviously the scheme plan and whatever Ben Johnson has, because I look at it this way as Ben Johnson. I mean, being up in Detroit, we all remember what happened last year. I felt like his playbook got too cute at a 15-2 season, and then Washington just took advantage of it and did whatever they wanted to. So I'm like, why would they stop running the football? I think is that the reason in which Ben is going to go into this game and go, I'm not doing what happened last year. I'm going to run the football and run the football for days until we end up winning those football games, marquee matchups like that. So another matchup I think is interesting, and people have been talking about it now, is the Rams and Panthers. To me, I love Matt Stafford, and he's been having an MVP caliber season. The wide receivers are talented, but we know the Panthers in their first matchup, they beat the Rams. Now, I feel as though I'm still taking the Rams in this game because I feel Sean McVay and his culture is, I'm not going to get embarrassed a second time, and especially when you're in a playoff setting. However, with Carolina, Bryce Young's obviously youngster, and now you got to think about the defensive front for Carolina as far as instilling pressures, finding ways for Matt Stafford to create and make mistakes. So I think that game, it either could be a runaway or it could be a shocking surpriser, depending on how the segues of the quarters end up going.
For me, this one is the Rams almost need to thank the football guys that of all teams to go on the road to and get embarrassed by was the Carolina Panthers. It was almost like a wake-up call. Next time you see these guys, you better not take them lightly. And, lo and behold, it could have cost them a first, the number one seed. Everything it did eventually cost them. So McVay, a lot of times you have to, get your team riled up. Hey, I know we're going over there and they're 7-9 on the season. Well, think about this. You were one of those 7 victories that they got. So as far as motivation, there doesn't have to be a whole lot. We were just embarrassed a few weeks ago over there. You better not let it happen again, or we're the ones that are going to be going home for the winter. So right off the bat, he's got motivation right there. And like I said, these guys have been there before. Stafford's been there before. You got a lot of guys with playoff experience. This is all in. The one thing that I'm hesitant of, man, you see that spread is up to 10.5, 11. And that can get you, that can get your head a little swole. And coincidentally, I was talking to my son today on the way home because we were talking about some of these games. He's 15 years old. We were coming home from school. And I reminded him, I was like, you know what? I was like, when I was in Atlanta a bunch of years ago, we were 11-point dogs going up there to Minnesota, and we kind of pulled that one off. So anything is possible. In this instance, I don't think it's going to be possible because I do think Sean's going to have them ready to go. It's the playoffs. This isn't for anything but all the marbles. And I think they're going to have their heads on straight. And like you said, Jake, I think it could be either competitive or this could be a game where they win by 15 or 20. I'm anxious to see, my son's, he's crawled because he's a Rams fan. He's got his fingers crossed. He keeps giving me I'm just really scared about it. So I'm like, look, man, you should be okay. So, but I do think the Rams come away with this one with a moderately, as far as playoffs concerned, not easy win, but a confident win, getting them into the next round.
Absolutely. Yeah. There was a stay away game for me as far as just the betting wise, because it could either be it's a very high risk, especially if you're asking for a team to win and yet cover. So that might be a difficult situation. One of the other games, though, that's interesting, San Francisco and Philadelphia. So a certain someone went up and onto the air and basically called this the Bizarro Bowl. And because we have 12 of 14 quarterbacks represented in the playoffs that are first-round quarterbacks. And now you got Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts. My opinion is Philadelphia, since they acquired Jalen Phillips, they got so much motivation on their defense to instill sacks, instill pressures, and get after the quarterback. Whereas for San Francisco, that quote-unquote easy schedule everybody kept talking about before the season started, that didn't look so easy when injuries started going down. But that didn't stop Kyle Shanahan from opening up more of his playbook, finding ways in which to get comfortability for both Mac Jones and Brock Purdy. Because without George Kittle, I felt like, oh, Brock's not gonna have his reliable target until Tungus ended up coming around and he's getting a bunch of looks. So I think in this game, it's going to be very physical as far as Philadelphia is concerned. But I'm more paying attention to of how both these offenses are going to look, because with Philadelphia, 4 straight games, we've had 400 yards on the ground from Saquon Barkley. And I'm like, they got to run the football well. Jalen has to find ways to improvise like he did last year with just going and getting first downs and keep the ball on their side and wear out the defense. But then you've got San Francisco, who George Kittle's back. Christian McCaffrey's been on his healthy side, and he's only got the amount of weapons he has on his side. So I think in this game, it's a coin flip, but I'm thinking I have more trust in Philadelphia's defense than I do have of just both these offenses when physicality is now in the middle of play in this game.
If Philly stays to their roots, which is run the ball, throw it moderately. You don't need to make Jalen Hurts a star. If AJ Green starts reading books on the sideline, let him. This isn't a game where you just, oh, he's over there pouting, so we got to start throwing him the ball. Their identity is running the ball, Saquon, 25 to 30 times, Jalen getting out there, picking up some first downs, 5 to 10 times with his legs, maybe a couple of design runs. You get the tush push going if you need to, and then you sprinkle some throw in there. If they do that, they're virtually, from time to time, unbeatable. When they get into trouble, when all of a sudden we got to try to make Jalen a star, or we got the wide receivers out there pouting because they're not getting enough action, so we got to start throwing the ball. And the next thing you know, because they can't cover up, that offense is not explosive enough to cover up any issues that the defense might have. And if that defense has any type of off day and they're playing from behind or playing with a team with equal firepower or keeping the ball away from them, they're in trouble. So their best bet is to run the ball, manage the clock, get as few or as many points as you need, and let that defense eat on the other side. But when they start getting cute, that's when they fall into trouble. For San Fran, I mean, they're like the walking wounded every year. You know, in our division out here with the Cardinals, we see it every year. It's like, golly, what are they putting in the water in training camp? But they, for somehow this year, because they went through the same things last year. This year they go from winning 6 games to all of a sudden almost being the number 1 seed, coming up 1 game short with the same amount of injuries, and that's not even accounting for the 2 players that they let go. Denver took from them, defensively. So, I mean, Shanahan's doing an amazing job. It's just going to be, for me, this is it was styles make fights or whatever it is. This is going to be, for me, whoever style overtakes the other. And that means if, like, San Francisco jumps out in front or just gets, stops the Phillies run game, or and all of a sudden they want to start throwing the ball around, they're in for trouble. If the Eagles can get after Purdy, make him start second-guessing some of his first reads, and all of a sudden he's doing scrambling and they can shut down McCaffrey, this becomes a Philly game that imposes their will on San Fran. That's what I'll be looking from the very beginning. I think it was up to like 6 points or something like that as far as Eagles. I don't buy that. I think it's going to be a much closer game. And in some circles, I might actually even pick San Fran to go over there and pick up a win because I'm so unsure about how Philly is going to attack this. But I'm looking for another there's going to be another marquee game as far as the weekend goes, man. I'm so excited. This is going to be such a fun weekend to watch football, man. I'm really excited.
So a hard question here that I think is interesting because it's more about predicting an outcome, and it's with these 2 quarterbacks, Josh Allen and I would say Justin Herbert. Josh Allen first. My big thing is this is the most wide open AFC that I think we've ever seen in a long time, with no Burrow, no Lamar, and no Pat Mahomes. And so Josh Allen, my problem with the Bills is they get so inconsistent with their defense because it's times in which they can play solid and times in which they just let 30-plus points get by them. And that's what really bothers me the most is now they have to rely on Josh Allen to put his cape on and have to save the Bills' seasons every time they're playing a game. Well, now they're playing Jacksonville, and Jacksonville has been kicking arse. And they have just been the team that they're making an argument. They could be a very good completed team with the way their defense has been getting pass rushes and how Trevor Lawrence hasn't even thrown a pick in a while. So this game, if Buffalo does not come away with this, I feel Sean McDermott, this is the end of the road, because I've been calling him the modern day Martin Schottenheimer because he's a good coach but cannot win the big games. And so that was where it was a lot of concern. What do you think about this? Because I really am hoping Josh Allen could pull it off, but if they don't, big changes. And I'm talking big changes, not even from McDermott, but even for Brandon being the GM, because they need to get somebody in this building to get Buffalo up on top.
I'm right there with you, everything you said, and then some. Of all years, with like you said, the trio, Burrow be, not Lamar, no Patrick Mahomes, you would think like, well, the next man up has got to be Buffalo. You would think there'd be a 1 or 2 seed with the way this, and look at the season they've had. You're talking about an opportunity just slipping through your fingers, and if not now, when? Say they get bounced out this, early in the playoffs here. It's an indictment on the entire organization and not just head coach, like you said, GM. And the other thing is, you would have to think if they have an early exit here, where do you go? They're as far as the staff, because every year you have the meetings, it's like everybody comes in the room. Okay, well, what went wrong and how do we correct it? In my opinion, if you're ownership, you're like, I don't care what went wrong, and I'm not going to let you guys correct it. That was just, this has been a bad year. The only way they can rescue it is a long, deep run that ends in the Super Bowl at the very least. If they don't get there, then, as you mentioned, it might be time to clean house and start all over. And where does that leave, Josh Allen? I mean, they've got a lot of retooling. This would, of all the years, to not potentially not even have one playoff game at home because you just messed the regular season up that much. It's incomprehensible to me, and that's where they sit though. So the gauntlet is in front of them. They know they got to go down to Jacksonville starting this weekend, and that's where it all starts. Problem is, Jacksonville isn't Jacksonville of old. Jacksonville looks pretty doggone good. And I was one of those people that didn't believe in Jacksonville almost to the very end. You know what got me? When they went to Denver and beat Denver, I was like, okay, I've been wrong all year long because I do these confidence pools and everything. I'm like, nah, this is where it ends. This is where it ends every week. When they went to Denver and won, okay, yeah, I'm a believer. I'm done. And that's what they're going to be facing. And it's going to be really interesting to see what type of game this is. As you mentioned, Jacksonville seems more balanced. Cohen, their head coach, he's really got Trevor playing well. They've got to go down and not just worry about that offense, but that defense as well. And if they shut Josh down, what's it going to look like on the other side? Because you got ATM running the ball. If this is one of those games where the Jekyll side of the Buffalo defense shows up and they want to give up one of those 35, 40-point games, then you can cancel Christmas because that's pretty much going to be it. But I'm really interested. This is going to be one that's going to show me, like I said, there might be a reason why some teams are like Harbaugh and some of those other potential coaches are holding off, because how cool. The first thing you want if you're taking over a new organization, quarterback, GM, that. And just think if you're the prospect of taking over Buffalo with Josh Allen, if you're a new established head coach. So we'll see. A lot of change could come from this game alone, and I'm right there with you. McDermott's got a lot to prove here, man. They got to go down there and get a win.
So my final question is, and I've been hearing a lot of the narratives all over and we do this all the time every year with these playoff teams. But my biggest takeaway, so Denver and Seattle are obviously number 1 seeds. To me personally, I have been watching Denver, and I live here in Denver, and I keep saying, why is it that I can't seem to trust Denver's offensive scheme plan? Jet sweeps, swing routes, and then not to mention these dump offs that when they're trying to get yards after the catch. You got to be able to stretch the field. I know they rely so heavily on their defense, but if you truthfully want to be a competitive team, you have to stretch the field. Any possession you get, because those are game-winning drives. So, a thing that was interesting, So this NFL season has been full of surprises, and I think there's still some surprises. But would it surprise you, Ed? And I look at a team in which has a horrible O-line, has times in which they never get over the hump, or they're too overrated. The quarterback, 6 years, he's never won a playoff game. But it's coach and grit and fight. And they've got a quarterback in Justin Herbert that I'm like, if I look at this, it couldn't have landed any better, because New England is a young team. They're turning things around, but it's all about the trust process. Because if they get past New England, they got to face Denver again for a third time, and they already know the playbook. And that's where I'm like, do you see a world where potentially the Chargers could be the, no pun intended, shockers that end up in the AFC Championship?
It amazes how quickly things change. The Chargers, their biggest, I think, enemy for all the years has just been their reputation.
Yeah.
Anytime you talk about a team, they'll Charger it up, because we've seen them lose games, lose leads, fail in the playoffs. That's their entire existence. And now the difference now, though, is you got a Harbaugh in there that is, that dude can turn things around. And he's done it at both levels. He did it the year with San Fran years ago, went to Michigan, wins the national title, did it in Stanford, and he's got them. It's about mentality with them now. And I do see a world, I'm telling you, just like you, that depending on how, because I'm not so confident in one or two, meaning in the AFC especially. You got a young team in New England. Your schedule was really soft. But you do have to play who you play, though. But their experience, their lack of, I should say, who they played could come back to bite them. Denver's biggest problem, man, is so inconsistent at the quarterback position. And I know Sean, and no offense, I hope I'm not offending here, Sean Payton has been given the moniker of genius. He's got one Super Bowl just like a whole bunch of other people, head coaches, but he's supposed to be this master genius. I'm like, well, show me, And they put together a good season here, but I'm still, as far as I'm looking at Andy Reid with several Super Bowls. I'm looking at all these, and he's got his one along with, he doesn't even have as many as Coughlin in New York. I'm like, but he's just genius. So I'm waiting to see the genius. He's working with his young quarterback that he's so-called handpicked, and it really hasn't materialized yet. And who knows, that might be the downfall of the team, is that the defense is so good. But the thing about, and you mentioned it, in the playoffs especially, you got to be able to strike quickly. You got to be able to go down the field sometime. Everything can't be a 14-yard dump-off drive, because teams get wise to that. They start jumping routes. They take the shorter stuff away. They almost force you to go down the field. If you can't do it consistently, that's where you're going to come up short. That's where you're going to constantly be coming off the field. And, all year they've been playing with fire, falling behind, and they have these comebacks, and they have these score wins, and they add up after a while, but all it takes is one of those not to turn your way in the postseason, and you're going home just like everybody else. And that's my fear for Denver, is that they've had a great season. They're still on that learning curve as well, and don't let some of those tough lessons come back to bite you, which they could. Like I said, you fall behind, and next you never get from behind, and season's over, or just too many times you're just dinking and dunking and not taking your shots up the field, and it just doesn't pay off. So it'll be interesting to see if one or two, meaning New England or Denver, even gets to the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. But I think, to go back to your question, I would not be surprised if a Chargers team did it. They've got all the elements other than health themselves sometime. With Herbert being dinged up, left tackle sometime in and out. They don't really have defensively. They've got some holes themselves, but the way everything could fall, I could see them, making a showing. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when I watch their defense off the bye week, and since then, they haven't allowed more than 20 points on the opposing side. So they've been playing a lot of that physical shut down and find every way that you possibly can, whether it's a win or a loss. You find ways to end up fighting. So,
Yes,
and the
sir.
funny thing is, think about it. I've been saying this is a Peyton Manning roadway because Peyton didn't get his first playoff win until 2003. So it's like something can happen. So, yeah, it's going to be a fun playoff. I'm excited for this weekend. Could not wait for a better time than this. And we'll see what Monday morning is going to sound and look like by the time that we get there.
Yes,
Ed,
sir.
appreciate you for taking the time and being up on here. Enjoy the rest of the weekend, the wild card weekend upon us, and we'll see who survives and advances and what questions we have for the teams that lost it. Appreciate you
having me on, brother. Look forward to talking to you again soon.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, it's